When the question is asked of what are the most memorable speedruns, retro games are often some of the first games that come to mind. More than this, some of the most competitive speedrunning histories come from older generation games. The first game that comes to my mind that has been discussed, contested, and ran for over 3 decades is Super Mario Bros. While NES classics like Super Mario Bros., Zelda, and even games like Ninja Gaiden and Castlevania get placed in the spotlight for some of the richest, most fascinating speedruns, there is a hidden gem that 1 month out of the year becomes one of the most highly contested ran games on speedrun.com. I of course am talking about the classic game Die Hard for the NES. Die Hard, a game once thought to be solely a meme game by speedrunner standards, in the last 3 years has garnered a bunch of attention, with every December dozens of runners coming back to make their claim for the world record. So outside of Die Hard being a Christmas classic, how did the game go from a stair running simulator with nearly nobody running it, to a game where the top runners use glitches, frame perfect tricks, and thousands of resets to get that coveted world record run? The first recorded Die Hard any % completion was a 5:36 by KirkQ back in 2011. This run contained a few of the mechanics that would still be used in current runs, but overall looked quite a bit different than what the any % run has come to be known as. KirkQ's 5:36 began as all Die Hard runs did at the time, with going to floor 34 and running on the glass until the character's foot HP reached 0. In Die Hard for the NES, your character's run speed is dependent on this foot HP, so although it might seem a bit strange to make your character run at the slowest possible speed in a speedrun, it's actually an important step in progressing the game. The lock level increases as in-game time passes. This lock level unlocks more enemies and important items to complete the run. If you have a lower run speed as you move between floors, more time passes. In result, if you have the slowest possible run speed, the most time passes. After lowering his foot HP to 0, he goes back to the staircase and runs between floors to progress to lock level 7. After progressing to level 7, he exits on floor 31 to obtain 2 medkits to regain some of his running speed before heading back to floor 34 after the final lock occurs. Effectively, this lock level progression has skipped to the end of the game without fighting any enemies. He then calls the elevator before grabbing 2 more medkits to maximize his run speed for the final section of the game. After taking the elevator to floor 30, the only remaining task is to kill all 39 enemies that have been avoided thus far. Fortunately for KirkQ, all these enemies will come running into floor 30 by taking the elevators, making for some easy kills and easy item pickups to refill any lost HP and ammo. After swiftly dispatching all 39 enemies, KirkQ makes his way into the final room where Hans Gruber is waiting. A quick 3 shots and 1 HP remaining, KirkQ clocks in at a 5:36 world record at the time. This run was extremely well executed for back in 2011, as killing the enemies on floor 30 can be quite difficult, and KirkQ managed to leave minimal amounts of downtime between the cycles of enemies coming out of the elevators. It was clear there was still plenty of time to save, but in 2011, Die Hard was not a very popular game, so KirkQ's run would remain as the time to beat for the foreseeable future. It wouldn't be until 2013 that Die Hard would finally get some of the spotlight that it deserved. At the start of 2013, a little event known as Awesome Games Done Quick would be occurring, and at this event, Die Hard would be run. Esteemed runners of the category, like Withheld and the aforementioned KirkQ, would be running the game under the category of all enemies. This was effectively any % for the time, as the only other way known to complete the game actually just resulted in a game over. While AGDQ runs of the game did not result in any notable world records or strategy changes, it did begin the narrative of Die Hard being a meme speedrun. KirkQ took the friendly competition of racing against others at AGDQ as a reason to lower his time even further after the event, obtaining a 4:56 not soon after. This run used most of the same strategies, however instead opted to damage their feet on floor 33 instead of floor 34, and only grab the medkits before entering the elevator. These small adjustments and the cleaner enemy clear resulted in a 40-second world record improvement. This time would once again stand for quite a long time. Nobody wanted to run against it, as it was an extremely well executed run, especially for a game considered by most to be a joke for speedrunning. It would take a motivated individual looking to add yet another game to their resume to lower this time much further with the current strategies. In 2016, over 3 years since KirkQ managed his 4:56, a familiar face in the NES speedrunning community showed an interest in taking the record. Toad22484 took to speedrunning Die Hard any % at the start of 2016 and quickly lowered the world record to a 4:54, beating the previous record by only 2 seconds. This run was much the same from the runs previous to it, just executed slightly quicker on the bottom floor, as Toad was confident someone would likely return to the category and seeing there was still possible time save with the current route. The next day, Toad managed to lower the time even further, taking it to a 4:48. This would be the last time save seen from simply killing enemies quicker on floor 30, but far from the end of our story. No more than 2 days after this jaw-dropping execution of floor 30, resulting in a 4:48, the biggest change in routing for the category up to this point was found. Killing all 39 enemies after entering floor 30 was taking speedrunners no less than a minute and a half, effectively a third of the runtime up to this point. If there was a way to somehow skip needing to kill all these enemies and enter directly into the final boss room with Hans Gruber, the run would become both easier to execute and much faster. On January 31st, 2016, Toad did just that. While the rest of the run up to entering floor 30 was essentially the same, a way was found to clip into Hans Gruber's room. By running into the door of the elevator and waiting for it to close on you, one was able to clip directly into the boss fight, bypassing the need to kill any enemies at all. This made for a final time of an astonishing 316, thought to be impossible prior to the skip being discovered. Toad was still not satisfied with this time, however, and lowered it once again the very next day with the same strategy, executing the rest of the route with cleaner movement and better enemy luck to secure a time of 309. Toad was the undisputed king of Die Hard any percent. Up to this point, Die Hard has remained a relatively small community, as a not too popular retro game with a speedrun consisting of far too much stair running. Fortunately for the small speedrunning community, yet another familiar event would place a spotlight on our legendary game. Right around the time Toad is beginning to produce dominant world record runs for the game, Big 20 number 4 announced Die Hard any percent as one of the goals. Big 20 is an NES speedrun race put on by the best of NES, where 20 distinct NES games with unique goals are announced, and a few weeks are given to practice before event day, where all of the best NES speedrunners compete for the best consecutive time in completing all of the goals. For the 4th iteration, Die Hard was selected as one of the games. This brought many familiar retro speedrunners to Die Hard, albeit not all too happy to run the game. Regardless, the Big 20 played a large role in keeping the Die Hard speedrun alive and remembered. Even with all this new competition entering the scene, Toad's run would not be beaten with current strategies. Toad's run stood for over a year and a half until a new runner entered the Die Hard speedrunning community and changed the any percent category as we knew it. On August 20th, 2017, Flowamer 1922 submitted an interesting run to the leaderboards. It started off the same by directly running to the staircase to head to the upper floors. This is where the route immediately began to differ. Instead of stopping on floor 33 or 34 to begin damaging their foot health, they continued up to floor 35 and entered the room on the far right. In this room, an enemy of particular importance can spawn as they drop a key item unique to this floor. That item being a key to unlock the door to the roof. Thus far, in Die Hard any percent runs, we have not needed to have access to the roof, and at first glance, this seems to be a waste of time to obtain an item that doesn't get us any closer to Hans Gruber. Flowamer continued their run, foregoing damaging their foot health, and instead chose to run between floor 31 and 32 until the lock level progressed closely between 2 and 3. Once this occurs, they exit onto floor 31, obtaining a C4 in the top right room, and then heading downwards toward an elevator, where the second important enemy of this route will spawn. Heinrich, a blue enemy, once killed drops a green detonator. Flowamer picks this up and rushes back to the stairs, heading up to floor 35 and then the roof. Using the key on the roof door, placing the C4 using the detonator in the middle of the helipad, and running to the top of the screen would naturally result in a game over, as the explosion of the C4 kills us. However, after the final explosion, a victory screen pops up, indicating a successful finish. So, what exactly happened here? Well, Flowamer had just introduced a glitch to the Die Hard community they had known for over 6 years that had completely changed the goal of Die Hard any percent. For whatever reason, the C4 explosion did not reach the top of the screen. In any scenario where the character was above the final pixel of the stairs heading off the helipad, the player would not die, resulting in a good ending finish of the game. While this was not the initial intention of the category, it was decided that any good ending qualified as an any percent run. For the foreseeable future of Die Hard speedrunning, Hans Gruber would no longer be in the run. On August 21st, 2017, Flowamer used this new route to lower the world record time to an astonishing 2:42. While the overall movement and decision to maintain full foot health likely cost some time, this run was still nearly 30 seconds faster than Toad's previous record. Only 2 days later, on August 23rd, Substyle would lower this time to a 2:20, with general cleaner movement and faster enemy kills. However, Flowamer would win this battle, lowering the time the very next day to a 2:17. Similarly, Flowamer had just executed the run cleaner, saving 3 extra seconds over Substyle's time. On January 3rd, 2018, 9volt managed to beat the world record by just 1 second, securing a time of 2:16. This run solidified the idea that Die Hard any percent would eventually become a record held by milliseconds, instead of the dozens of seconds KirkQ's old records used to stand by. 6 months later, on July 26, 2018, JSR managed to secure a new world record of 2:14, primarily due to slightly damaging his foot HP on floor 33 prior to heading up to the top floor. This allowed for more time to pass on each transition between the stairs, shortening the amount of cycles required. However, this route change also costs time due to the slower running speed on the longer floors. On July 29th, 2018, AJ Firecracker would have their first world record with a run that once again takes advantage of fully damaging their foot HP. Keeping with JSR's strategy, AJ opts to rush floor 33 and use the glass to damage their feet. Instead of continuing back to floor 35 to obtain the key, AJ heads directly to transition to lock level 3 and then to floor 31. Once on floor 31, he uses an initial shot to lure the enemy with the detonator closer to the start of the floor, while he enters the second room to use the medkit to regain some of the running speed. After killing and obtaining the detonator, AJ heads to floor 35 and gets the key in a similar fashion. Unlike these previous runs with a similar route, AJ chooses to grab the C4 hidden behind a door directly before the hallway, heading to the roof. With these adjustments, he managed to end with a 2:07. AJ would lower this time 2 more times the next few days, the first of which being a 2:05 on July 30th, that opted to grab the medkit in the first room on floor 31, and then running to the end of the hallway to grab the detonator. On July 31st, AJ would get a 1:54, the first ever sub 2. He managed this by getting a new spawn location for the detonator enemy in the second room on floor 31, cutting the time required to run to the end of the hall. This spawn would become the new piece of RNG that is required for the perfect world record run. Keeping nearly everything else the same, on August 20th, Lucha Jim would beat the world record by only a 1/10 of a second. While this run did manage to obtain Lucha the world record by executing ever so slightly cleaner, Lucha would have an even larger impact on the diehard speedrunning community the very next year. Before this, however, on April 3rd, 2019, Yoho9000 would beat the world record by 3/10 of a second, choosing to enter the second room on floor 31 to obtain both the detonator and the medkit. At this point, both baiting out the enemy from the second room with an initial shot and grabbing the medkit in the first room, and entering the second room to grab both seemed to be almost comparable in best possible times. The constant trading of world records would subside going into the summer of 2019, but a new group of experienced speedrunners were about to be introduced to Die Hard Any %. In July of 2019, the European Speedrunner Assembly, or ESA, was putting on their summer event where hundreds of speedrunners come together to celebrate their hobby, show off their runs to old and new friends, and socialize for a full week. ESA Summer 2019 was host to some of the most talented speedrunners in the world, and more world record holders than you could name. One of these talented runners, a previous world record holder of Die Hard, Lucha, was preparing to share the game with some of his speedrunning friends. Little did Lucha know at the time, in a side room at the convention space where he was showing a few of these friends how to complete a Die Hard Any % run, he was teaching 2 of the people that would come to be 2 of the best Die Hard players the game has ever seen. If it wasn't for Lucha bringing Die Hard to this group of passionate speedrunning friends at ESA 2019, it is very unlikely the game would become as big of a December phenomenon as we see today. The first newcomer from Lucha's lesson that would hold the world record only 1 day after the event was 2C+, on July 29th, 2019. At this point, it became standard practice to damage your foot HP on floor 33's glass until the timer read about 15 seconds. This ensured the correct lock level cycle to be in sync with your exit onto floor 31. 2C chose to use the route that grabbed both the detonator and the medkit in the second room. He managed to save time by quickly killing the enemy that spawns occasionally in the first room and achieved a time of 1:53, only 1 second faster than the previous record. This began the hype of the ESA friends dominating the Die Hard leaderboards. Not to be surpassed by his students, Lucha on September 2nd, 2019 would retake the world record with a 1:52. This run began with a slightly faster glass exit than 2C's as Lucha managed to stay on the glass for the entirety of the floor. He then chose to return to the previous route of baiting out the detonator enemy in the second room, killing him outside the door, and then grabbing the medkit in the first room. Even with a bad Ruth and some general sloppy movement, these additional time saves were enough to save the 1 second over the world record. December of 2019 was the first instance of Die Hard becoming the December game to speedrun. This of course is because of the well-established fact that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. 2C+ took this to heart, and on December 7th, 2019, he managed to retake the world record with a 1:51, inching even closer to that 150 barrier. The run looked quite a bit similar to his previous world record, still opting to enter the second room on floor 31. Majority of the time save came from a quicker glass exit on floor 33 and a faster C4 placement on the roof. While 2C was satisfied with his time, he knew he would be coming back to the game next December in hopes to lower the record to a sub 150. However, Lucha's other ESA student would beat 2C to the punch. While Lucha and 2C had been trading the record back and forth after their ESA Die Hard lesson, there was a growing group of friends that were chasing after these 2 frontrunners. One of these friends, Escapeman222, who had also learned Die Hard Any % from Lucha at ESA, had only been 1 or 2 seconds behind the world record for the last 6 months. On March 3rd, 2020, Skate would finally make the jump to world record. By using a unique strategy of firing multiple shots, Skate's floor 31 was one of the cleanest to this point. With almost perfect movement and a clean key pickup on floor 35, Skate was able to achieve a 1:49, the first ever sub 150 for the category. What was once just the time of running up and down stairs, now runners were able to complete the entire game. Nobody would run against this time until the coveted December, where all the top runners would return and make their attempt at the world record before the new year. As he planned with his return on December 21st, 2020, 2C+ would take back the record with a 1:48. This run actually took place during a December marathon where a bunch of the top runners who were friends attempted to take down their personal best at the same time. 2C's additional time save came from finally switching to grabbing the medkit in the front room. The movement used on floor 31 would become the standard for all future runners, with a first shot to bait out the detonator enemy, a second shot to kill them, and a third to enter the first room. By getting a clean kill on the additional enemy as he exited the front room, 2C was able to secure the new record. This time, however, would only stand for 2 days, as Skate would do one final Die Hard stream on December 23rd, 2020, and managed to take back the world record by just 0.2 of a second. This run could be described as not only a Christmas miracle for obtaining the world record, but also due to some insane bullet dodges on floor 31 instead of a quick enemy kill. Regardless, this run would be difficult to beat as most slot current strategies could only be pushed to a low 147. We wouldn't be seeing any improvements until the next year as both 2C and Skate had completed their last December stream for 2020. That is until 6 days later when a completely new strategy that has been in the game since its creation was introduced to the top runners. At this point, speedrunning Die Hard in December had grown so much that it was one of the most ran games on allspeedrun.com for the month of December. With this, some big name speedrunners were beginning to make their way into the community. Of important note for this story, Arcus, the speedrunning cowboy who's best known for Ninja Gaiden, began to speedrun Die Hard any percent. Vocab from Arcus's community introduced the lesser known fact that with enough bullets, one could shoot down the roof door. This was important for two reasons. 1. Many world records would die to floor 35 RNG, as the enemy that holds the key doesn't always spawn in the correct location. And 2. Shooting down the door was simply faster. On December 29th, 2020, after hearing about the new strategy, Skate would return to solidify its world record before heading into the new year. By using the new strategy and having an absurdly fast floor 31, Skate managed a low 145. As December 2020 was ending, and this run being seconds faster than the next closest time, nobody would be running against it until the next year. With December 2021, the two titans of the category would not be making a return to Die Hard any percent. Skate, believed to have no reason to run against his own time, turned his attention to other Die Hard categories for the year. 2C, in similar fashion, was content with his second place time and chose to focus on other speedrunning games for the year. This left Die Hard any percent wide open for December 2021 for all the new runners and some old ones to make their best attempt at beating Skate's 145. To give an idea how far ahead this run was at the time, 2C's second place time was a full second slower, and the rest of the field of runners were over 2 seconds behind. Someone would need to shave 2 to 3 seconds off their personal best to compete with Skate. Two runners would make their best attempt at doing just that. Arcus would make his return to running Die Hard in 2021 with his original goal set to simply PB. After quickly surpassing all of his expectations, he began to realize that the world record might be in his grasp. Arcus would stream Die Hard any percent attempts for 8 hours a day for most of December, as he was simply enjoying the game for the time and continuously seeing good progress. With the support of Arcus's large community and proficient Tazers looking to help, it was discovered that frame rules existed to ensure good RNG patterns for the first floors. By waiting on the main screen of the game and listening to a sound cue with a 2-frame window, Arcus was able to consistently get perfect RNG on floor 33. This allowed Arcus to be more efficient with his resets. The second runner closing in on Skate's time was TRG Morty. While he has not been talked about, he joined the Die Hard any percent grind a year prior, being topped by second place 2C and holding the 4th place time himself. While he was not accustomed to using the newly found sound cue to ensure better RNG, he managed to learn that floor 31 could be completed more consistently by shooting the first door diagonally. So, while his resets were far less efficient than other runners, his floor 31s were often executed correctly when the RNG was generous. Both of these runners would grind intensely for the remainder of December 2021. On Christmas Day, TRG Morty would be the first out of the two to achieve a 145, only a half second behind Skate's world record. A few days later, Arcus would replicate the feat by obtaining a lower 145, only 0.2 of a second behind the record. Both runners would have their fair share of runs that could easily world record with the correct RNG on floor 35, but all too often their gun would run out of bullets for the roof door, or enemy spawns on the roof would force them to take a slower route. With December 2021 coming quickly to an end, both runners made their final attempts on December 31st to get the world record. And, after over 10,000 attempts, Arcus finally managed to get the run. While this run only saved 0.2 of a second and over 3 dozen runners with over hundreds of hours of attempts were trying to break the record, it finally happened. Arcus became the first new person in over a year and a half to hold the Die Hard any percent world record. The story of the most popular December speedrun, being broken on December 31st by a person who had over 10,000 attempts for the month, is why we still speedrun. It may have taken hundreds of hours to just shave tenths of seconds, but it had to be done because we knew it could be done. What does this mean for Die Hard going forward? Arcus' sum of best indicates at least one more second can be saved, although that extra second will likely be just as hard, if not harder to get than the last 2 tenths that were just saved. I imagine, next December, you'll see old and new names alike making their best attempts at lowering the record even further. Speedrunners will always attempt to complete what was previously thought to be impossible. Thank you all so much for watching and learning about the story of Die Hard speedrunning.